This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
1 2 1 2 3 check 1 2 3.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Tish James on the hot seat. Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. It's arraignment day for New York's top prosecutor, embattled Attorney General Letitia James, accused of committing mortgage fraud while purchasing a home in Virginia. She pled not guilty today to the charges at a federal courthouse in Norfolk. Here's former federal prosecutor Trey Gowdy.
How strong the case is depends upon the witnesses, and we'll know starting today what the government has.
The AG's facing up to 30 years in prison if convicted. She calls the case against her a weaponization of the justice system. A trade war with Canada is brewing, and all because of a television commercial. President Trump says he's ending all trade negotiations with Canada because of a TV ad that's airing north of the border. It featured former President Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs.
Such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer.
The White House says that ad was taken out of context and officials in Canada used it without permission. The Reagan Foundation also taking issue with that commercial, saying it misrepresents the former president. President Trump says tariffs are vital to our national security and economic interests. Wheels up Air Force One. President Trump left today for a 7-day tour of Asia that includes stops in Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea. Deputy White House Press Secretary Anna Kelly.
At the end of the day, the president will leverage his deal-making skills. He is the deal-maker-in-chief to make sure we have better deals for our country.
President Trump meets face-to-face next week with Chinese leader Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in South Korea. They will discuss, among other things, trade and the flow of fentanyl coming into this country from China. Federal officers opened fire last night on a U-Haul truck that tried to run them over at a Coast Guard base near Oakland, California. Demonstrators were there to protest recent ICE operations. The massive makeover of the White House continues to cause controversy in the nation's capital. A $300 million ballroom is being built where the East Wing once stood. Once complete, it will nearly double the size of the current executive mansion.
It'll be the most beautiful ballroom anywhere in the world.
The renovation during a lengthy government shutdown, however, facing some pushback. The White House says it has the legal authority to overhaul the president's residence. Private donations will cover the cost. President Trump has vowed to pitch in as well.
How much am I donating? I won't be able to tell you until I finish, but I'll donate whatever's needed.
1,600 Pennsylvania avenues undergone numerous renovations over the course of its 220-year history. Theodore Roosevelt built the West Wing in 1902. Harry Truman added the second-floor portico in 1948, and Gerald Ford built an outdoor swimming pool in 1975. Alaska Airlines is still reeling from a massive outage yesterday. It forced the cancellation of hundreds of flights.
The airline says the IT outage has been restored, but it'll take a while to reposition its planes and crews after it had to cancel at least 230 flights. Alaska says the problem began in the afternoon with a failure at its primary data center. The ground stop was lifted at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time. The airline says it was not a cyber attack and flight safety was never compromised.
Michael Wallace reporting the Trump administration's finalized plans to open up Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil and gas drilling. ANWR, as it's known, is the largest wildlife refuge in the nation, spanning some 20 million acres in northeastern Alaska. Reporter David Schechter.
The decision is sparking intense backlash from environmental groups who warn drilling will industrialize the fragile Alaskan ecosystem, threaten animals such as caribou and polar bears, and accelerate the pace of climate change.
Supporters argue oil drilling in Alaska will strengthen our energy independence and create jobs. A link's been found between nighttime smartphone use and youth suicide. Here's correspondent Meg Oliver.
A new study by Virginia Tech shows nighttime screen use and easy access to over-the-counter medicine is linked to teen suicide attempts. 2 out of 3 teens overdosed after 8 p.m. and 3 out of 4 were on screens right before.
Those who regularly use marijuana are more likely than others to become regular users of tobacco.
The study, published in the journal Tobacco Control, found that about 13% of what researchers described as new onset tobacco use is likely attributable to cannabis use. Call it a reverse gateway. Tobacco smoking has been considered a gateway to cannabis use since the 1970s, when many more people smoked cigarettes and when almost everyone who used cannabis had smoked tobacco first. Now, cannabis is becoming the gateway to tobacco.
Christopher Cruz on Capitol Hill. The Christian faith that once defined American values is on track to lose its majority status in this country by the year 2070. According to the Pew Research Center, 62% of Americans say they are Christian today. Back in 1970, that figure was 90%. And if current trends continue, in 45 years, Christians will make up just 46% of the U.S. population. We're learning more today about that massive mob-linked gambling scandal that has rocked professional basketball. NBC's Laura Jarrett.
Federal authorities dubbed the investigation Operation Royal Flush, a brazen scheme that sounds more like a Hollywood plot than reality, with allegations of rigging poker games and ties to the mafia, while a different alleged scheme surrounding illegal betting now raising some tough questions for the league.
An NBA Hall of Famer, current star, and a former player among 34 people taken into custody. Joseph Nocella, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, has the following message for those who were implicated.
Your winning streak has ended. Your luck has run out. Violating the law is a losing proposition, and you can bet on that.
The cheating scandal reportedly netted more than $7 million from rigged NBA games and poker matches involving several organized crime families. Game 1 of the World Series is tonight in Toronto. The Blue Jays are back in the Fall Classic for the first time in more than 30 years. Toronto manager John Schneider.
I'm really excited about this. It's just really cool for the organization, and I'm just thankful and humbled that I'm the one doing it.
Their opponent, the LA Dodgers, who are hoping to become the first team since the 1998-99 Yankees to win back-to-back titles. First pitch of the 2025 World Series is set for just past 8 on Fox. Color commentator John Schmaltz.
What I can tell you is this series is going to be much better than people anticipated. A heavy favorite Dodgers coming in after a week off, dominated the postseason. Their pitching was incredible, facing a team that has one of the best offensive runs in the postseason I've ever seen, the Toronto Blue Jays. So I know a lot of people aren't giving Toronto much of a chance, but I would tell people not so fast. I followed Toronto this whole run. Their hitting has been incredible. It's the best strength against strength, pitching against hitting. Toronto's going to make this a great series.
That's John Schmaltz with Fox Sports. We'll have more sports with Randy coming up. Also ahead on the Noon Report, heating aid in jeopardy, Indian mascots in Pennsylvania, and an update on a 40-year-old missing persons case.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. Our chilly November-like weather continues. Lake-effect showers and breaks of sun in the forecast heading into the weekend. The detailed forecast is up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. Let's check the stories making news across New York and Pennsylvania. Early voting starts tomorrow in New York for the November 4th election. We're talking more about what's on the ballot and why you should take part, even if it's an off-year election. That's coming up a little later on today's capital connection. The government shutdown has delayed home heating assistance in New York. Mark Goshgarian with Spectrum News.
Leaders with the State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance say because of the government shutdown, the season will now start November 17th instead of November 4th, as the office is unable to open the program without the assurance of federal funding.
The government shutdowns also impacted the low-income home heating assistance program in Pennsylvania. Dr. Valerie Arkush heads up the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services.
So as the cold weather gets worse and changes, people are really going to be wondering if they're going to be able to afford their heating bills.
The Commonwealth has pushed up its LIHEAP start date to December 3rd. That's a full month later than usual. A Bradford County, Pennsylvania judge has been suspended following allegations of misconduct. Magisterial Judge Jonathan Wilcox accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a defendant. Wilcox has served as a judge in Bradford County for 25 years. A bill to ban Native American mascots in Pennsylvania schools is now before the State House. Democrat Chris Rabb says indigenous people are degraded by Indian nicknames and logos.
The impact on indigenous youth to caricatures and things that reduce one's identity, culture, and heritage to something that is a slogan, a chant, or some cartoonish depiction of their people.
Critics contend it would cost too much to purge all PA schools of Native American imagery. New York already forbids Indian-themed mascots, but several school districts are in court fighting the rules. If you've got unused, unwanted, or expired medications lying around at home, well, tomorrow's the day you can dispose of them safely. It's National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day. Cops and firefighters will be collecting your drugs from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. Syringes, liquids, or needles will not be collected. You can find collection sites near you at dea.gov/takebackday. That's dea.gov/takebackday. Officials in Western Pennsylvania have a new lead in a 40-year-old cold case involving a missing child. The story from Family Life's Brian Query.
Hopes are rising in the search for Sherry Mahan, the 8-year-old who disappeared in 1985 after stepping off her school bus in Winfield Township, Butler County. State police and the FBI dug an area earlier this week along River Road in South Buffalo Township, about 10 miles from where she was last seen. Investigators used heavy equipment to excavate a small section of private property. The operation comes just weeks after cadaver dogs made multiple alerts on another nearby property. Police have not identified any suspects or said whether anything was recovered, but supporters say they remain hopeful that new answers could finally be on the horizon. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you, Brian. A magnitude 2.2 earthquake this week in western New York rattled some nerves. Its epicenter was 5 miles underneath Lake Ontario, some 30 miles northeast of Rochester. No injuries or property damage reported, but these Wayne County residents tell WROC they were literally shaken up.
A violent shake, 2 loud noises. At first I thought it was an explosion. I looked up and down the street to see if I could see any flames or anything as the house blew up.
I have to say I was quite startled by it. I didn't think that we would have that kind of an event here.
Other residents say they didn't feel the quake, but they certainly heard a thunder-like sound from it back on Wednesday. COVID may be gone, but the work from home movement is sticking around, and that is having an impact on rush hour traffic.
Commuters are making more use of their hybrid work capabilities, and there's more traveling happening in the middle of the day.
Transportation analyst David Schrank says because of remote work, Thursday is now the busiest travel day of the week. Hybrid employees are choosing to work from home more often on Fridays. Sports is next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, 4 days after getting thumped 38-24 against the Colts, the LA Chargers bounced back in a big way, humbling the Vikings 37-10. Justin Herbert threw for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kamani Bedell rushed for 117 yards and a score. The Chargers moved to 5-3 on the season. In the NBA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on fire, scoring a career-high 55 points. Oklahoma City won their second straight double overtime game to begin the season, 141-135 over Indiana. In San Francisco, the Nuggets' Aaron Gordon also hit the 50-point mark, but his team fell to the Warriors 137-131 in overtime. Steph Curry knocked down 42 points for Golden State, and he nailed the game-tying three-pointer late in regulation to send the game into the OT. Golden State now 2-0. Let's move to hockey. The Rangers fell to the Sharks in overtime 6-5. Macklin Celebrini had his second career hat trick to lead San Jose. Sid the Kid had 2 goals and an assist. He led the Penguins over the Panthers 5-3. It was Crosby's 4th multi-point game already this season. The Flyers fell to Ottawa 2-1. In New York, ML Heineman scored twice and 5 other guys scored, as well as the Islanders put a hurt on the Detroit Red Wings. 7-2 the final. Also picking up wins, the Blackhawks, Ducks, Mammoth, Predators, Kraken, Kings, Canes, and Oilers. Gotta tell you, gonna take me a little bit to get used to saying Mammoth. And Game 1 of the World Series is tonight in Toronto as the Blue Jays and the Dodgers face off for the best-of-7 championship. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you very much, Randy. And still to come on this Friday edition of the Noon Report, why transing kids is losing steam. Can Stefanik beat Hochul? And pushing pot in PA.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Well, for years now, the number of young people embracing alternative sexual identities has grown consistently until now. In a recent article at Unheard, Eric Kaufman of the University of Buckingham summarized findings from a poll that was taken earlier this year of over 68,000 college students from more than 250 institutions. He wrote, quote, "My analysis of the raw data shows that in that year, just 3.6% of respondents identified as a gender other than male or female. By comparison, that figure was 5.2% in 2024 and 6.8% in 2022 and 2023. In other words, the share of trans-identified students has effectively halved in just 2 years," end quote. While it is certainly too early to pronounce the transgender craze over, the vibe has clearly shifted. And there are lessons to be learned from the way it is shifting. First, many young people who identified as trans or non-binary over the last decade were not even struggling with their identity. Instead, they didn't want to be on the wrong side of the oppressor-oppressed binary that they were constantly hearing about. A few years ago, I heard of a middle school teacher who was asked how many of her students identified as LGBTQ. The teacher replied, with a tone as if it were a strange question with an obvious answer, "Oh, all of them do." When subsequently asked how many of her students were having sex, the teacher said, "Well, none of them. The reason they claimed an alternative sexual identity," she thought, "is," and I quote again, "no one wants to be cis or straight anymore. Being trans or non-binary was a way to climb the social ladder." Second, there were studies like the Cass Report that exposed the lies about so-called gender-affirming care and unsettled the power of the suicide myth that was haunting so many parents. Eventually, even high-profile magazines like The Atlantic called out the coercive and manipulative trope of, would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? And there were a lot of parents who saw their daughters lose competitions and scholarships to boys. Even more, they didn't like the biological realities of perverted men and boys invading their daughters' locker rooms and showers. Third, more people are now speaking out, and they've been empowered by those who were never silenced to begin with. J.K. Rowling does deserve a lot of credit for refusing to sit silently while women were being erased. Now, granted, she has the wit, the public profile, and the bank account to more easily absorb the social consequences. But the fact that she spoke up gave others the courage and the room to do the same. Billboard Chris showed up everywhere, repeatedly, willing to be arrested again and again for the sake of the truth. Chloe Cole not only had the courage to admit that she was wrong, she has encouraged now millions to see the victims of these terrible ideas for who they are and to speak out on their behalf. Certainly what Abigail Shrier, Ryan Anderson, Dr. Alan Josephson, and so many other thought leaders said about this phenomenon from the very beginning has been thoroughly vindicated, that this has always been a social contagion. And there are others, far too many to mention, who had the courage when needed to confront this horrible lie. Of course, the battle is far from over. Still, their stories and this story, how the unthinkable became unquestionable, but then how the spiral of silence was broken by those willing to say what's true, should give us all courage to stand for and with truth. And it should clarify for all of us who follow Jesus just why God has called us to this particular moment in human history. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thanks, John. Outside next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast. Our call for this afternoon. Variable clouds, intervals of sun, a couple of showers. For numerous lake effect rain showers east of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. High temps, upper 40s to mid 50s. Tonight, partly cloudy, a couple of evening showers, low temps 30s. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds in central and eastern Pennsylvania, mostly cloudy elsewhere with a shower or two, and continued chilly, high temps around 50. Sunday, clouds break for some sun after some morning drizzle, with high temperatures around or just over 50.
Thank you, Kevin. It's Friday, folks, the 24th of October, and this is the Noon Report on Family Life. This is Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you, the listener, direct connection to all that's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues at the state capitals. They are, as always, Michael Gear with the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire at New York Families. Well, gentlemen, start your engines. Jay, I'll begin with you. We're getting real close to Election Day 2025. All eyes, of course, on the big mayor's race out of New York City. But for those of us who do not live in New York City, why is it still worth showing up at the polls Tuesday, November 4th?
Yeah, this is one of those years in which you're going to see many local elections on the ballot. And really what happens at the local level has a great impact on your life. And so you will be voting for mayors and voting for town boards. There is actually a special election outside of your listening area, but up in the North Country for a state assembly seat. And so in various places in the state, you will have various kinds of candidates and offices to vote for. And so we encourage people to vote in every election because every election does have an impact on your life.
Michael, a simple yes or no vote will determine the fate of the 3 liberal justices on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That, of course, is the big contest a week from Tuesday, those so-called retention elections. How difficult will it be to toss those justices from the bench?
Well, the retention elections typically go in favor of holding on to those seats, but there have been precedents in the past where that doesn't happen. And I think in this particular race, and a lot of money being spent on both sides, that there is a great potential for the no vote to win out in these 3 Supreme Court elections. I think what's notable in these retention elections especially is just how controversial these justices have been on issues related to gerrymandering, COVID shutdowns. The abortion issue is prominent in this race. All 3 of these justices have been backed by the abortion lobby, so that raises the profile of this race to a significant place that maybe the no's might win.
Yeah. Jason, there's been a lot of clamoring for prison reform in light of the big story this week out of Oneida County, New York, the verdicts in those Marcy murder trials, 1 conviction, 2 acquittals. What's been your reaction to the verdict, and what are the greatest needs when it comes to our correctional institutions in New York?
Well, looking at the family of Robert Brooks, they are greatly concerned that they do not feel that justice has been completely satisfied in this situation. And, I wasn't in the room. I don't know exactly what happened, but I have a hard time seeing when there is essentially a mob there that beat that man, and some did not act to stop it.
I have a problem with that. There is a push to bring some reforms to our criminal justice system, and much of what is being proposed and is currently on the governor's desk does not seem objectionable. I expect she will sign it into law, but I'm not sure that any of these legal changes are going to make all that much difference until we really change what's going on in the hearts and minds of every individual. You simply cannot stop all of these things with a law. We have to change hearts and minds how we approach the dignity of every individual.
Well, Michael, by my count, the state budget was due 118 days ago, but instead of addressing that, Pennsylvania politicians seem more interested in abortion expansion and marijuana. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in Harrisburg with Senate Bill 49, as well as these extreme and aggressive abortion measures in the House Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is the only state in the nation that doesn't have a budget settled, and yet the legislature, or some in the legislature, pushing some bills that don't stand a chance of getting ultimately passed. That would be the case in these pro-abortion bills that are in the House of Representatives. These bills would include putting a constitutional right to abortion all the way up through birth, also creating a situation where health and safety regulations on abortion clinics and the 24-hour waiting period and other things being repealed. Those are really being done by legislators in the Democrat House, simply, I think, to try to turn out the vote and to raise money, but ultimately not going to get past the Pennsylvania Senate. On the marijuana issue, Senate Bill 49 would establish a control board for marijuana or cannabis, and to some degree, it's looking at the sort of wild, wild west that exists with medical marijuana here in Pennsylvania, but we are concerned that it may grease the skids for legalization of commercial sale of marijuana ultimately.
And with the dysfunction right now in Harrisburg, any chance that could slip into a final deal and become law without people really knowing it?
Well, we hope and pray not, but those kinds of things happen when you get in these budget impasses. We've seen it happen before with expanded gambling, and so we are keeping a close watch on what's happening at the Capitol as a result.
Well, Jason, New York North Country Congresswoman Elise Stefanik says her internal polling shows she's within striking distance of Governor Hochul in the 2026 gubernatorial race. I know Stefanik has yet to declare herself a candidate, but I'm wondering, are New York Republican Party leaders rallying around Stefanik, or is there still a chance that a dark horse might emerge as the official GOP challenger next year?
I don't think there'll be a challenger. It does appear that the GOP has been clearing the path for a single candidate. They're not looking to get into a messy primary in 2026, taking resources away from challenging the sitting governor, Kathy Hochul. And I fully expect that after this November's election that Representative Stefanik will announce. Every indication out there seems to be that she's positioning herself to run. So I think we're a matter of a few weeks away from having a real challenge here in the state of New York. I'll say this, I'm watching what's happening in New Jersey, where there's a Republican candidate who is surging and may win that race.
Yeah.
And if a Republican candidate wins in New Jersey, I certainly think it means New York could be in play next year.
Wow, who would have thought New Jersey would be a purple state? All of a sudden it is now. That's a race really worth keeping an eye on November 4th. Michael, there's legislation in the Pennsylvania House. Anything that comes out of the House, I know you keep a close eye on. It's House Bill 1873. It would change the legal definition of child abuse and neglect in the Commonwealth in order to avoid overreach by child protective workers. Do you support this effort, or will it, in the end, endanger children if adopted?
Well, our policy and legal teams here at PA Family are continuing to review the specifics of that bill, but at first blush, it does look like it's aimed at curbing some of the excesses or overreach of the Child Protective Services group, especially in situations where children are not really in danger from abuse. When you think about things like a 13-year-old babysitting other kids, those situations have resulted in some Child Protective Services involved, or even just walking to school or playing outside unsupervised. Sometimes we've gotten a little bit overreaching in terms of thinking that children are in danger when they're really not.
Yeah.
But we continue to watch it, and we'll be analyzing that bill.
All right. Jason, the first of the year, new state law will forbid natural gas hookups in new home constructions. We've been talking a lot about this gas ban in New York. Critics are saying this is going to price people people out of homes. Housing is so desperately needed in New York. Given the rising cost of energy already, do you anticipate Governor Hochul will delay implementation of this law?
Well, Republicans have been railing against this proposal for some time, but just this week, a number of Democrat members in the state legislature wrote to the governor, and they've asked her to delay this deadline, to push it off. They said we just simply cannot meet it. And so now we're seeing movement, even the Democratic side of the aisle, on this issue. I think it does indicate that it is just not feasible at this time to reach those goals, and I expect that something's going to have to give. Remember, it is an election year, and so every issue is going to matter, and I think that Governor Hochul will be paying attention to where the people are on this particular issue.
Michael, there is research out that shows the transing of kids, for lack of a better term, may be slowing down. I know Jason is writing about this on his website as well. Some studies have shown that as many as 4 out of 5 trans kids will grow out of it by adulthood. That being said, are Pennsylvania hospitals still performing these dangerous operations on minors? And if so, what's being done about it?
Yeah, they are dangerous and irreversible and have a long-lasting harm. It's really hard to pin down the specifics of what various Pennsylvania hospital networks may or may not be doing, but things have changed significantly since the Trump administration said it will deny federal funding to hospitals that continue to provide these damaging surgeries to minors. So right now what we know is Penn State Health and UPMC have publicly stated they're no longer offering these procedures, but notably Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, or CHOP as it's referred to, is apparently continuing to do it and fighting the Trump administration over the rule. What we need to do is get a state law passed, but with Josh Shapiro as our governor, that's not likely in the near future.
That is Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire with New York Families for this week's edition of Capital Connection. You can download all our Capital Connection podcasts online anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. Low pressure spinning in eastern Canada will continue to circulate spokes of chilly, unsettled air our way, and the result, a continuation of the unsettled weather. And with that will come lake effect showers, breaks of sun, and below normal temperatures. Our call for this afternoon, variable clouds, intervals of sun, a couple of showers. For numerous lake effect rain showers east of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, high temps upper 40s to mid 50s. Tonight, partly cloudy, a couple of evening showers, low temps 30s. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds in central and eastern Pennsylvania, mostly cloudy elsewhere with a shower or two, and continued chilly, high temps around 50. Sunday, clouds break for some sun after some morning drizzle with high temperatures around or just over 50.
Great work. Thank you, Kevin. Finally, today celebrating one of America's favorite cold cuts. It's National Bologna Day.
My bologna has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R.
Oscar Mayer released that jingle back in 1974, and it got a nation eating the cold cut. Its origins are Italian, but we changed the name from Bologna, where it's from, to the American bologna. And we eat 800 million pounds of it every year. Joey Chestnut holds the world record for eating it, nearly 16 pounds in 8 minutes. No competition today, just an old school bologna sandwich. I'm Bree Tennis.
All right, thank you, Bree. And just like that, our time is up. That's our world, the world we live in. Friday, October 24th. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.